Some months ago, UUCIL member Jim Aiken spoke to me about bringing some paintings into our sanctuary. Hi, Jim. Stand up and wave. All right. Jim's late father, Ben Aiken, who was a member here from way back in fellowship days, painted the paintings we see here to my left this morning. Now, such requests, I would like to do something different, have to go through proper channels. And so it took a while. Periodic exhibits are an important part. I mean, I was glad to encourage it and tell the board and appropriate committees. Now, this is a good thing. These exhibits are important parts in the life of many of our UU congregations. In the Santa Fe congregation, which I served for almost 10 years, we had a rotating art exhibit every month. Now, Santa Fe has a lot of artists, so that wasn't really all that hard, and many of them looking for venues here and there that they could display their work. But Rancho Palos Verdes, where Carol and I were last year, had regularly rotating exhibits also. Everywhere just about I've served, it's my observation that Unitarian Universalists appreciate art and recognize its connection to the holy and the true that we celebrate, especially on Sunday mornings. For the past few months, Pushpa Dalal's photographs of many hands were hung on this same north wall of your beautiful sanctuary, making an important statement about our faith's commitment to transforming the insights of heart and head into the work of our hands in the actual world. Anyway, Jim printed a little thing. It's in the back. There's all kinds of things in the back. If you're bored later, you can just go back there. There's sign-ups for these cottage meetings. There's room for the meeting at my house. There's the Jim's write-up. There's stuff about the time capsule. I think there's all kinds of important things. Anyway, he asked me to consider saying something about his dad's art, described by one critic as synthetic pointillism, when it was unveiled, and I was happy to agree. In other words, he said, well, your sermon, could you kind of say something in your sermon? And I said, sure. He said, I'll write a sermon. He said, well, the paintings are pretty colorful, and I responded, that's good. I've been contemplating a sermon on color ever since I first walked into this sanctuary with its bright blue chancel, Shelley Covey's stunning origami sculpture there, and your community-crafted and colorful tapestry right behind the pulpit. I mean, it's bright and good. So, this morning's remarks. I got nudged. You can all nudge me. You know, and sometimes I'm not all that enthusiastic about an idea, and you come back and say, you know, you really should preach on it. My favorite professor at college and my foremost mentor was a classicist and a humanist. He actually taught Latin and Greek, though I took these evening seminars on ancient philosophy and ancient classical history. Now, Mr. Mattingly was also a scholar of aesthetics. He wrote broadly about medieval art. As he and his wife, Helen, equally brilliant and erudite, really kind of enlightened people in my experience, as they were preparing to move into a nursing home, he offered me many of his books. He said, I never give books away, but I'm turning over a new leaf. So here you can have all these different books, and I mean, half of them were incunabula, you know, and in Sanskrit and stuff. I couldn't use those, but some of the aesthetic books and the art history I did take. One of these books, Color, edited by Helen Varney, provides much of the source material for my remarks this morning. Also, the IT guy that I worked with at the First Unitarian Church of San Francisco a few years ago, Jonathan Silk, he had a copy of this book and he was heavily into it and he would be talking about it all the time. So it was actually his passion for its contents that got me to really read the book instead of just look at all the colorful pictures. Now, my mentor, Mr. Mattingly, was, into aesthetics, into linguistics. At root, though, he was a philosopher. And it was he who turned me on to Plato and classical philosophy and really into the whole life of the mind. In his seminar, we studied Plato, of course, but also Pythagoras, Hippocrates, Aristotle, Plotinus, Pliny. All of these people concern themselves with the mysteries of color and its significance. Leonardo da Vinci related colors to the elements: yellow for the earth, green for water, blue for air, and red for fire. Sir Isaac Newton founded the science of color. His discoveries laid the groundwork for optics and have remained pretty much the accepted understanding ever since. Isaac Newton published a lot that gets ignored by modern people. He was really as much a medieval mystical alchemist as an empirical scientist. And his perception of 7 colors in the spectrum, as opposed to 6, may have been influenced by his occult preternatural ideas. For Newton, 7 was a mystical number imbued with magical properties. Plus, there were 7 notes in the diatonic musical scale and 7 purported planets, at least at that time. That was all we were aware of. Voltaire and Goethe followed up on Newton's studies and picked up on what he said and went their own directions. The point is, all of these great thinkers and culture builders were fascinated by color. Over the centuries, there have been many others. Physicians who proposed its curative properties, philosophers and divines who testified to its role in assuaging gods and ensuring bountiful harvests, composers who related color to musical expression, scientists who explained its role in evolution, and psychologists who have postulated its ability to reveal elements of human personality. The point is, color is central to life and to human meaning. So near at hand, so close to our experience, color is often overlooked. Overlooked by virtue of its ubiquity, in the same way that fishes apparently have no concept of the water in which they swim. For land-dwelling human beings, color is an immediate experience, acting directly on the senses and the emotions. And yet, color is curiously abstract. Once divorced from the object it belongs to, it becomes difficult to grasp. It's notoriously difficult to explain red or purple or any color to people who are born blind. It's just so they can't figure it. One guy, John Locke, in the 1600s, I guess, describes one person he knew who had some success describing color to the blind by describing red as a trumpet, okay, and these different colors as sounds, certain kinds of sounds, but we don't know how successful he really was. We know what he said he did. For those graced with the sense of sight, color infuses every waking moment, even penetrating our dreams. Color affects us emotionally, making things warm or cold, provocative or sympathetic, exciting or tranquil. It enriches our world and our lives dramatically. And yet, curiously, for the sighted, much of the time, color is essentially taken for granted and almost not seen at all, despite that it's everywhere. Artists like Jim's dad and like Pushpa and like the crafters of this quilt and this sculpture, they remind us to see color everywhere, to celebrate its ubiquity, not ignore it. Artists help us see what's in front of our eyes. Scientists help us understand, in fact, what it is we are seeing. Look at the cover of our Sunday bulletin. I had to really lobby with Claire to make color come, but I couldn't see doing a color sermon and having a black and white. Anyway, the precise arrangement of colors you see turns up repeatedly in nature, the spectrum. It's in the spray over a waterfall, the sparkle of a diamond ring or crystal chandelier, and most spectacularly, in rainbows. Understood by the ancient Greeks as iris, a messenger linking gods to human beings, by Greenlanders as the hem of God's garments, and by Norsemen as a bridge whereby heroes would cross to Valhalla. These are powerful poetic images, perhaps, but none of them all that helpful when it comes to understanding what the spectrum is. What caused, asked our forebears, what caused these vivid bands? And why is the arrangement of colors always the same? Philosophers east and west have advanced their various theories for centuries, most of them about the mixing of light and dark, or about the balancing of the various humors in the body and in the world of nature. Now, Isaac Newton, I go out on a limb here and say he was a Unitarian. He kind of was. But anyway, he helped us understand what we're seeing when we see color. Briefly, I could go back to your 8th grade science. The universe is permeated by waves of various lengths: gamma waves, X-rays, ultraviolet, infrared, and so on. The visible spectrum is a very narrow band within the much wider electromagnetic spectrum. The various colors are narrower subsections, if you will, in the narrow band of the visible. Orange is one of the colors of the spectrum, the color of tangerines, cantaloupe, carrots, color of my stole. Newton explained that color, kind of counterintuitively, that color is really a function of light, not these things, not tangerines, melons, and carrots. Now, common sense kind of tells you, no, color's in the thing. After all, scrape a carrot, chop it up, and its orangeness remains. As much a part of a carrot as its taste or its texture. How could it not be in the carrot? But in fact, proved Newton, it's in the light, not the thing. Or rather, it's the color is in the light reflected back or absorbed. If a black object just absorbs all the light that comes into it, and a white, like a snow-covered field, reflects it all, or white reflects none of it, black absorbs it all, white reflects it all. So, now colored objects, unlike white or black, are absorbed and reflected selectively. Some's absorbed, some's reflected. In the case of the carrot, most of the photons from the green, blue, and violet wavelengths are absorbed, and photons from the red, orange, and yellow regions of the wavelength spectrum are strongly reflected. Now, the carrot owes its orange color to pigments called carotenoids, which it's those pigments in it that absorb shortwave light and reflect long wavelengths. And these same pigments are why salmon, lobsters, autumn leaves, they're in those too, and they give them their characteristic color. Different pigments reflect and absorb differently. And so things have different colors, or appear to. Dyes and paints, dyes which made this fabric orange, were obtained until fairly recently from natural pigments only, found in nature. But in the last century, chemists have figured out how to make synthetic pigments, and our world is so much more colorful as a result. Synthetic pigments notwithstanding, the world of nature was and is already pretty colorful. Our church administrator, Claire Moran, and her husband are taking an excursion this week to Borrego Springs in Southern Cal, it's kind of southwest of the Salton Sea. And they're going there to observe the fabulous wildflowers that are blooming there right now at this time of year. I've done that myself, and it's fabulous. Indeed, flowers across the earth have almost limited variety, shaped and colored by evolution to attract insects, birds, and mammals best suited to pollinating them. Animal colors facilitate their search for food, safety from predators, and they're very involved in the whole mating behavior, dance, and fulfillment. Color is an integral aspect of human nature as well. Physicians from time immemorial have considered a person's color in arriving at their diagnoses. Analysis of the color of a patient's skin, tongue, eyes, and bodily secretions are instrumental in diagnosing illness and a return to health. Now, the Bay Area being the Bay Area, soon after arriving in Berkeley in 1974, I was given a gift of having my colors done. I don't know how many of you have had your colors done, but especially in the 70s, this was very important. And having one's colors done is kind of an outgrowth of the human potential movement, where personal color consultants help clients appreciate their unique personal coloring, their skin tone, their hair and eyes and whatnot, so that you can choose your wardrobe accordingly. And my girlfriend at the time thought that was important for me for some reason. I was then a spring, but I think I've become more of an autumn with the graying hair, and anyhow. Mostly, the human potential movement, let's put it this, it was about a lot more than wardrobe consultation. Mostly it was about empowerment, and still is about personal empowerment, but also political empowerment. Now, I arrived, as I said, in California in 1974, and since that time, when I first got here, in the Bay Area and Unitarian Universalism in the whole country, I think, we've made progress, good progress, towards realizing the fruits of the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts of 1964 and 65. And toward creating the beloved community those milestone laws challenged us to establish. A big part of that work, and here in our church and across our country, includes welcoming and celebrating the contributions of people of color. Learning, all of us, of every ethnicity, but especially white people, to see as people our more darkly shaded sisters and brothers from across the globe and in our very midst. Those who have eyes, see, said Jesus. Everyone who has eyes and chooses to see can learn how and more fully appreciate the panoply of colors at our every hand. We can learn to be more, I would say, like Margaret Cook, whose life we celebrated and memorialized yesterday. That is, we can learn to be more colorful. She was a colorful person and personality. Like Margaret Cook, I challenge you, add color to your life, including, like her, a dash of the off color from time to time. Welcome color into your life and your heart. It will add color to the lives of people around you at the same time. And so concluding, as a congregation, so that's all personal, kind of moral, telling you what to do. But as a congregation, let me for one moment employ my prophetic voice and implore two things to you as a community. This is partly coming out of these 5 developmental tasks as an interim minister. I'm trying to help you get the second one of which is own your identity, okay? So you've got a pretty colorful place, and this is good. Own it, you know? Don't let its ubiquity leave you unaware. So I challenge you to continue to celebrate art and artistry by displaying the visual art of members and friends here in the same way that you so masterfully celebrate music. And second, keep up the spiritual work you're struggling in the midst of, working through what it means to become an ever more anti-racist and multicultural beloved community. These are good things. Celebrate color, all colors, across the globe and in our community. So may it be. Amen.